Hey folks, welcome back to another video. You join me in sunny Spain where I am for the foreseeable future. Little bit, I say misty, not by like Welsh standards or anything, but there's a bit of cloud like hanging around, a bit of atmosphere this morning, but it's still pretty warm. And the rest of the area is nice and blue sky as always. Look, all that climbing so much, looking back up to Jalea as well. Today's video, I've been a little bit hesitant to do this one because there's just so much about it, you know, on the internet in general, YouTube, whatever it might be, especially on flipping Instagram. But I do get loads of questions, so I thought it was worth one last video from me about it. I say last one, but you know, maybe I'll do another one, but it won't be for another year or so. And it's about this flipping Girth Hitch Masterpoint belay or Clove Hitch Masterpoint belay, that kind of thing. And the questions I get asked all the time, email, comments on YouTube, whatever, is it safe to use? And often that comes from people who have learnt other methods, all right? Because it is a relatively new concept, a newish idea, and it does seem a bit strange at first. The spoiler here is that yes, it is safe to use, but we'll talk about it a bit more in a minute. I'm going to go up to a bit of crag and find somewhere to set up. I've got some trad bits with me to plug in so I can build a belay and chat through it. And the other part of the question is kind of, okay, if it is safe to use, which it is, like I say, why it's not the thing that I teach right from the get-go, okay? So I'll sort of talk through my thought process of all that, but give me a minute to find a crag. Me and the boy will wander up, find a little bit to set this thing up as you watch him do a wee, and you'll join me in just a moment. Right, I found a little spot here that I've used before to plug a couple of bits of trad kit in. These spots are at a premium here in Chile. There's a reason everything's bolted. There's very little trad stuff to be had. Is a bit shady, is a bit chilly. I'll rattle on with it as quick as I can, but you know I do like to waffle. Got my sling set up. Girth Hitch Masterpoint belay, right? Some advantages to it. It's quick, isn't it? Look at that. Within a second or two, it's set up. Brilliant. A bigger advantage, not actually the setup time, it's the taking it down time, especially outside of like summer conditions. Not that I do a lot outside of summery conditions, but a fair bit of mountaineering, I suppose, to be honest, where I am wearing gloves, just not when it's super snowy, just when it's flipping cold and wet and stuff. It's quick to take apart, isn't it? There's no fiddling with a welded shut knot, especially when you've got like wet slings, wet skinny slings, and you can't feel your fingers and your climber's fallen off a couple of times, it's all welded shut. Doesn't really matter with this one. You just kind of give it a wiggle, slide the carabiner out, and it takes itself apart, doesn't it? I think for me that's its biggest advantage, is the sort of the de-rigging time, so you can be super efficient with it. One other method, very similar, talked about it before, Clove Hitch. Exactly the same principle. Carabiner in, do it up, jobs are good, and snug it up and everything as well. Same idea. It just comes out really easily at the end of it all. Now some people suggest putting a sliding X kind of affair in there as well. So you put a little cross in it, and then you do what you were going to do of putting your Girth Hitch in there. Say Girth Hitch, Lark's Foot, same things. I think there's other names for it as well. That's all good, isn't it? And you do that up, and basically this becomes the master point. So the carabiner becomes the master point. It does use an extra carabiner. That's perhaps a disadvantage, so that's okay as long as you're sort of prepared for it. People will often ask if it is redundant, right? So if this blows up, falls out, and there's weight on it, your climber's fallen off, there is the potential for this to slide. And on really skinny slings, that can be a relatively low force, right? But it won't completely slide through because there's loads of metal attached to it, so that would just jam up in there. I don't want that to happen, don't get me wrong, but it's not like complete failure. If one of these sides of sling cuts, then okay, yes, maybe that could slide through. Pretty unlikely though, isn't it? I mean, that's a fundamental thing to be thinking about when we're setting up a belay, not to have slings on sharp edges. So we have kind of got, I'm almost thinking in my mind, bigger things to worry about if we're setting up with slings over sharp edges. There's something gone wrong fundamentally there. Not to say that there might be a situation where, you know, that can happen and you haven't noticed, but just pay real attention to it and avoid it at all costs, really. I'm not going to quote like kilonewtons and stuff like that for these sort of pull tests and drop tests. You'll see there's loads of videos out there, so go and find them, like how not to highline and stuff like that. Some of them are like slow pull tests, which aren't necessarily that realistic for climbing, because, you know, fall off like that, don't we? Bang, hit it. So drop tests are perhaps more accurate, but the sliding X in tests seems to be a bit stronger, more resistant to slippage, so that might be a good thing to do. Lots of advantages to it, like I say. It's a nice thing to do. Some people suggest carrying perhaps a wrap ring. I see this suggested in the States a bit. So a wrap ring is just a ring of metal, really, a bit like what you'd find at the top on chains sometimes. And you just use that with your little lark's foot. That goes in, and then there's no gate to open or close, so perhaps that's a bit safer. The downside, you've got to remember to take it if you want to use it, obviously, but the same for any kit, isn't it? I'm not a massive fan of having sort of specific bits of kit for like one job. I want as much as possible my harness to do many jobs. So like the little lanyard on my nut key, for example, you know, that's a prusik cord, so I could use it for something else as well. So even the little things like that. So I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but, you know, who cares if you are? That's great. I often find, and this is fairly anecdotal really, but I often find that this ends up quite low. So my bits of gear are reasonably high, aren't they? You know, not quite a full stretch, but they're up above me. If I clove hitch to this now, it is above me, so, you know, it's safe and that. But I often find it's a little bit too low and cramps me up a bit, but this is probably just symptomatic of where I end up working and playing and stuff. So if I was to do what is more standard in my sort of instructing world, in the UK at least, you know, more of an overhand, it is a little bit higher, not by flipping shed loads, but it gives me a bit more space to work sometimes. The key for me with all these setups is sort of picking the right one for the right situation. So I do use the Girth Hitch Masterpoint belay quite a bit when I'm working and playing, but I use these ones loads as well. I don't like the idea of having a best method. I don't like that phrase best, because I want to pick the one that's appropriate. As long as it's safe, that's the main thing, isn't it? And then there's other things like, you know, being efficient and everything as well. But I don't like to get transfixed on one way being the best way. So often if I post something on Insta when I've been at work and I've done this setup, people say, oh, you should have used the Larksfoot Masterpoint belay, it's quicker, it's easier for your clients, and all that kind of stuff. Hey, well, sometimes it might be, sometimes it just might not be. There's always reasons. I don't just go to a belay and go, oh, I fancy doing this setup today. I'll pick what I think is the right one for that situation. I've said that it's safe. It is safe. Like I say, watch those other videos to see the, you know, how much it will pull and stuff like that. But I've also said that I don't teach it by default to relative novices. I teach it to more advanced climbers, and that's the key, isn't it, there? That I don't particularly think that the Larksfoot Girth Hitch Masterpoint BA is an advanced technique per se. It's not like, you know, complicated self-rescue stuff. But I do think there's a bit more judgment to be had with it before people sort of move on to it. One example, and this isn't a reason not to use it, and that's absolutely not what I'm saying, but people are overloaded with information these days, aren't they, from YouTube, and I'm guilty of that, Instagram, I'm guilty of that, all the other social medias as well. I'm perhaps part of the problem. But there's loads of setups, and one thing they'll see instructor types, guide types doing a lot is using the shelf perhaps. It's nice because it splits stuff up. I can have a belay device up high, my point down low, vice versa, clients here, there. Perhaps it helps to keep things clear. So in this one, okay, I've clipped into that shelf now, so that could be my, you know, second clipping in there. It's a nice strong point. I like my sleep. I like to sleep well at night. When people have been on a course with me, I like to have no stress that they're going to go away and do good things, and partly that's down to good teaching and consolidation on courses and what have you, but partly it's giving people real solid tactics. So if someone does go away and they're climbing in a pair, perhaps the first person comes up, clips himself into there with a clove hitch to make themselves safe. Their mate comes up, clips himself in there with a clove hitch to make themselves safe. What if this person then leads again? Sort of block leads, maybe they're just slightly more confident or something. They unclip from that, off they go. Do I like this? Not really. I like to have something in there at all times in case this sort of rolls a bit, but the chances of that happening, fairly slim, okay, because it's a fixed solid knot there, isn't it? So this person, whilst I'm not super happy, it's not terrible. Okay. What would happen if they got a bit confused though with the sort of the girth hitch version? Let's do that. For example, talks about some people preferring the sort of the sliding X combo, so let's put that X in there as well. Now, when I do my girth hitch in there, they're doing well so far. They've set it up right, they've gone into there, done that up, they've fixed themselves into this and everything like that. Perhaps this person's then gone into the shelf as in the last one, because like I say, that's what they've seen people doing before. Perhaps this time though, when they're going to lead again, they're going to block lead again, same as in the last example. They think they're going to be nice and efficient, tidy everything up as they go, so they take everything that they can with them, and as they take that out, the second person is no longer attached. So I'm not saying this is a reason not to use that setup, because any belay has its kind of modes of failure. Of course they do. I could misclip any kind of setup, couldn't I? Perhaps in this example of the more traditional one, traditional for me in my world, like I say, what mistakes could happen there? Well, they could clip into there, and then if that blew up, it would slide off the end. Pretty catastrophic. They could clip into one. Not quite so catastrophic if something fails, is it? But there's still perhaps some extension. For me, I feel like it's a little bit more foolproof than the girth hitch one. Okay, there's pros and cons to all of them. I hope I'm sort of making that clear, and I'm not saying you shouldn't use the girth hitch, I'm saying you should just use it appropriately. So for me, when I'm teaching, I teach like those fixed knot versions, and we get those dialed, and we might not even move on to the girth hitch one during the course of a couple of days, depends on the situations of where we are. But for me, people can learn the solid ones, the fixed ones, get all the judgments dialed, do loads of climbing, and then evolve into the girth hitch ones, and then they can use those when appropriate and just pick the appropriate one each and every time, and they'll have a long and happy climbing career. Now this video, it's just meant to be thought-provoking really. Some of you will agree with what I've said, great. Some of you won't agree with what I've said, that's equally great. Who am I to say my thought process is the right thought process? It's just a thought process built on loads of experience and loads of teaching, lots of other people, but we've all got our different ways of doing these things. So fire away in the comments what you reckon, because I'd love to hear about it. Like I say, who am I to say my way is the right way of doing things? So do fire away those comments and questions as always. I'm happy to answer those as best I can. I'm going to get going. It feels like lunchtime. The bells have just gone. One of the bells has just gone on the clock tower over there. The boy's perked up when something's disturbed him. So, as I ask every time, give us a like, give us a subscribe, find us on Insta, find us on Facebook. Use the Buy Me a Coffee link. All those things. Keep the boy fed with dog treats and everything. It's massively appreciate all the support. As always, though, thanks very much for watching. More videos coming up very soon.